りたいと思います。会場から、そしてオンラインの方からも質問が届いております。本日の会見もアーカイブされます、YouTube にて。
Anthony Rowley, South China Morning Post. Mr. Former Prime Minister, welcome to the FCCJ. Given the tremendous political uncertainty in Japan at the moment and the momentous developments in the outside world, how do you react to the idea of a government of national unity of Japan, i.e. all the parties joining together in one grand coalition? Do you think it's possible, and how do you feel personally about that idea?
はい、アントニー・ラウリーと申します。サウスチャイナモーニングポストの記者です。本日は本当にありがとうございます。日本での今政治的な不安定な状況、そして世界的にもそのような状況が見られるんですけれども、その中で例えば日本の今後の政権は大きな連立政権を作るすべての政党が一緒になって一つのユニティというようなものを連立政権として作るというような考え方はどういうふうに思いますでしょうか。すべての政党が一緒になって一つを作るというような提案についてのコメントです。
いわゆる挙国一致内閣みたいなものですね。私はそれは例えば東日本大震災13年前に発災をしましたけれども、そういう大きな災害があったときに与党や野党ではなくて全体でという機運が一回ありました。そういうことではない限りはね、例えば今回は政治とお金の問題をめぐって自民公明にはノーという意思表示が出たわけですから、そこと一緒になっていくという何か契機があるかというとそうではなくて、むしろ違う政権を作っていこうということの方が大事ではないかと思います。大きな災害とかパンデミックとかですね、全体がやっぱり急いで物事を決めていかなければいけない、与党野党関係なくという事態があるならばおっしゃったご提案はあり得るとは思いますが、現時点ではそうではないというふうに思います。
I think such a sort of a grand coalition, national unity coalition, is something, for example, in the case of following a significant, a severe national disaster, as we had the experience 13 years ago following the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami, for example. At a moment like that, there is perhaps a momentum and environment which could lead to or could require this kind of grand unity between different parties, where it does not matter whether you are the ruling or the opposition party when there are such urgent questions at hand. However, in the situation we are now, where it is the issue that the people have said no to the LDP and Komeito because of the political funding scandal, I don't believe that we are necessarily in this kind of situation where it calls for this sort of unity among the parties. There is not this kind of momentum. What is more important is to create a different and alternate government following the response of the people saying no to that. So in the case of following a significant and severe national disaster or pandemic where all parties need to work urgently to make decisions together, that kind of formation may be something to consider. However, I do not believe that that is the situation we have today.
Richard. Richard Lloyd-Parry of The Times. Thank you for talking to us this morning. What consequences do you think the election of Donald Trump will have for Japan? And if you were Prime Minister, and if Donald Trump, as he might, demanded that Japan pay more for the stationing of US troops in Japan, how would you respond? That was my first question. And then the second quick question, Japan is unique among the rich democracies in that for almost all of the past 70 years, it's been governed by just one political party. Now, the opposition has done unusually well in this election, but looking back historically and taking the broad view, why have opposition parties like yours found it so difficult to dislodge the LDP?
タイムズ紙のリチャード・ロイド・パリと申します。本日ありがとうございます。2点ほど質問がございます。まず1つ目はアメリカの大統領選で、トランプ氏が選ばれたことは日本にとってどのような、今後の影響結果などがあるのか。そしてもし総理大臣になられたとしたら、もしトランプ氏が今後も予想される日本政府にそのアメリカ軍の駐留に対してもっと予算を出してほしいということを日本政府にもしトランプ氏が言ってきたらど どのような、総理大臣だったらどのような反応を取るのかということがまず1つ目の質問です。そして2つ目の方が、日本は、その豊かな民主主義国家の中で非常にユニークなこととして、約70年間もずっとほとんど一つの政党がずっと政権を握っているという特徴、歴史的な状況があると思います。今回の選挙ではその野党が非常にいい結果を出したということが言えると思うんですけれども、歴史的な観点から言いますと、日本の中で、その自民党じゃない野党が政権を取ることがなぜこれほど難しいというふうに思われますでしょうか。
まず前半のところでありますけれども、11日に特別国会で石破さんが指名されるか、可能性は私もゼロではないと思っていますが、私が選ばれるか、新しい日本の首脳は、まずとにかく個人的な信頼関係を早くトランプ新大統領と結ぶべきだというふうに思っております。でなぜそういうことを申し上げるかというと、米国第一主義を掲げていることによって、国際社会へのコミットをどんどんと引いていく可能性が非常にあるというところは心配なんですね。でかつて、私が総理をやっていたときに EAS という東アジアと東南アジアの首脳会議がありました。でその時に、私の時は当時のカウンターパートのオバマ大統領に出席をしてもらいました。とても東南アジア諸国喜んでくれたんです。でところがその後トランプさんは全然来なくなってしまった。みんながっかりしてました。バイデンさんは最初来たけど、その後2年間来なくなってしまったので、改めてやっぱり特に緊迫する安保環境があるこのアジアにコミットしてもらうように、やっぱりトランプさんに出てもらうようなことをね、やっぱり日本はもっと進めて指導していかなければいけないというふうにまず思っていると思います。
In regards to the first question, the special diet session will be held on the 11th, of course. Well, I think that my own becoming prime minister there, the possibility is not zero, but if it is also Mr. Ishiba who becomes the prime minister then as well. Either way, what will be important is for the new prime minister, of the next prime minister of Japan, to build a personal relationship of trust with Mr. Trump as the first step. The reason for this is if we look at the policy which he is putting forward of America first, we have great concerns that this could mean stepping back on the commitment to the international community with such a situation as well. If I look back to the time when I was Prime Minister of Japan, we have the East Asian Summit. At the time, my counterpart in the United States was President Obama. When he attended the EAS, particularly the Southeast Asian countries and their heads of state were very happy that he did attend in this. However, when Mr. Trump became president, he did not attend at all, which was something very disappointing for these countries. When Mr. Biden became president, he did attend at first. However, following this for 2 years, he did not attend the summit at all, particularly in a part of the world such as Asia, where the security environment is in such a tense situation. Having this kind of commitment to Asia is something very important. And I believe that Japan should play a role in promoting and taking the leadership to encourage Mr. Trump to participate.
はい、その上でご質問の例えば日本に対してより防衛費の負担、基地負担要求があるかどうかまだ分かりませんけれども、そういう場合には思いやり予算を含めて日本はこれまで相応の対応をしているということはしっかり説明をする上に、例えば日米地位協定の問題も含めてこちらからも要求しなければいけないことについては主張をしていく、そういう関係にしたいというふうに思います。それから70年もずっと、自民党が、ある意味、ずっと政権を握り続けてきた。で十数年に1回しかでもチャンスがないんですね、政権交代。さっき言った93年と2009年と2回政権取ったことがあります。で今回十数年ぶりにチャンスが来たけど取りきれなかったんですが、次の参議院選挙も含めて場合によっては衆参ダブル選挙になるかもしれませんので、まさに今政権交代前夜だと思います。やっぱり与野党が緊張感があって、その時に初めてやっぱり国民全体の声が国会に反映できると思いますので、緊張感のある政治を実現できるように頑張っていきたいというふうに思いますし、十数年ぶりのチャンスだと思っています。
So in regards to this, well, of course, it is not clear whether he will, what kind of specific demands he might make on Japan in regards to defense or the base budget as well. By building up this opportunity for him, attending these summits, for having this sense, this relationship would be an opportunity, therefore, for Japan to state its case more in regards to this as well. In regards to, for example, the Japan's, the consideration budget for the bases as well, but also not only to explain our situation in response to, or our position in response to those demands, also to make the statements or requests from the side of Japan as well. For example, in regards to also to the U.S.-Japan Status of Forces Agreement, things that Japan would need to say to the United States. This is the kind of relationship that would be built up by this as well. As to the second question, the situation that Japan has basically been governed by the same party, the LDP, for the majority of the past 70 years, I think that this chance for a change in government is something that only comes up, less often than once a decade. We had the changes of government in 1993, then 2009, for example, as well. And so now it's, 10 plus years since this last change as well. While we were not able to realize, to have success in an actual change of government in this recent this past election, however, when we see the House of Council election coming up next year, and even the possibility of there being a double House election coming up as well, I believe that this is a chance which does still exist. Therefore, what is important for that is to make sure that we keep this kind of relationship of almost of tension between the ruling and opposition parties as well. So there is this critical sense of urgency within the relations. This is where we're going to be continuing to make our efforts, and that is the way to ensure that the people's will can then be reflected within politics. So I believe that this is still a chance that only comes more than every 10 plus years that we are still holding now.
Our next question will come from online. Eric Johnston of the Japan Times has sent in a question, and he spoke here recently, didn't say it that day, but apparently Nippon Ishin leader Nobuyuki Baba has announced he will not stand for re-election of his party. What does it mean for your efforts ahead of Monday or in the future to cooperate with the party?
次、オンラインの方で届いている質問で、ジャパンタイムズのエリック・ジョンソン記者からの質問です。選挙の直前にもこちらの方でも会見をされたんですけれども、維新の会の馬場伸幸氏が今後、その党首としてまた立たないというふうに発言をされているというようなことがあるんですけれども、そのようなことが今後、月曜日に向けて、そしてその後の維新の会との協力連携などにどのような意味を持つのでしょうか。
先週の段階で馬場代表とは党首会談を開きまして、でその時は私の考えている政治改革やあるいは国会改革のイメージについてお話をさせていただいて、関心を持っていただいたんですよね。ですから今週できればお会いをして、さっき申し上げたような具体的な政治改革のプラン、あるいは国会改革のプランを提示して、さらなる協力の呼びかけをしようと思っていたんですけれども、ちょっと今党内的には大変な状況なので、そういう党首会談をセットできる環境ではなくなってしまったことが残念ではあります。ただ紙としてね、こういうことを考えてますということを私のプランというのを維新の皆さんにはご提示をして、さらなる検討をお願いをしていきたいというふうに思います。他党に関わることなので、これ以上コメントはしにくいんですけれども、考え方の整理をした上で、さらなる提示をしていきたいとは思っています。
At the time when I met last with Mr. Baba last week, I presented to him my image of the kind of political reform and diet reform that we have in mind, and he did indicate interest in regards to this. However, this week I had hoped for an opportunity to meet with him once again and put forward more concrete our plans for reform and so on, and call for this further cooperation with his party. However, it seems that because of the challenging circumstances or situation inside inside the party, inside Ishin at the moment, it is not unfortunately possible to have this kind of meeting with other party heads at the moment, which is something unfortunate. However, while it will not be necessarily in an in-person meeting, I hope to organize our proposals plans on paper and to share this with him and also with the Ishin party members as well for their consideration. Because this is, of course, something to do with another party's internal situation, it's difficult to comment more than that, but we will still be putting forward our proposals and our thoughts for this reform and cooperation to them.
Yes, sir.
拓也西村フリーランスジャーナリスト、レッドミーアスキンジャパニーズ、日本語で伺います。参議院選の前にですね、まだ衆議院がですね、特別国会開かれてない、代表おっしゃるように、誰が総理大臣なのかまだ分からない状態で、やはり多数派形成が鍵になってくると思うんですけれども、代表は党首会談を重ねておりますが、これは多数派を作るために、政党同士の枠組みでの多数派を考えているのか、あるいは個別の議員に働きかけて協力を促す、いわゆる一本釣り、こういうことは頭にないのでしょうか。
My name is Nishimura, freelance. Of course, we have the House of Councils election upcoming and so on, but even before that as well, we still have the situation where it is not yet certain who will be the next Prime Minister of Japan, and looking at how to form a majority towards this is key at the moment. However, I would like to ask, within your different discussions you're meeting with party heads at the moment, if you are only looking at creating this kind of majority through party-to-party coordination, this kind of cooperation, or if you are also considering approaching individual Diet members for their support and cooperation in regards to this as well.
現時点の取り組みはですね、臨時国会の時に石破政権に対して内閣不信任案を共同提出をした野党ということで、対象としてはだから維新、国民、共産、この3党で、今日お会いする社民党というのは同じ会派でしたので、共同行動をとっているということで、社民党も含めて党と党との関係の中で今検討していただいているという流れです。一方で、例えば有志の会のように個別に考えた無所属の人たち、これは個別にも働きかけをさせていただいていると、合わせて両方やっているような今状況であります。党の中のね、個別の誰かにというやり方は今していません。いや、それはやっぱりね、政党間の疑心暗鬼を生んでは今良くないと思いますので、それは気をつけていかなければいけないと思います。
So within our current initiatives, what we are doing at the moment, you're particularly targeting those opposition parties and you have the vote of no confidence in Mr. Ishiba's government there as well. So in the special diet session, so looking at targeting Ishin, the DPPJ, and the Communist Party as well. Within this also includes the SDP as well. So this is looking at consideration within the relationship, party-to-party relationship there as well. At the same time, there are also independent members who are part of sort of voluntary, independent groups of parliamentarians as well, who we are also speaking with. So it is this joint approach. However, then there was the follow-up question about whether there would be any approaching individuals within specific political parties, and that is not something I would pursue, because this is, of course, to do with the trust and relationships between each of the parties. So there's no intention to approach individuals within existing political parties.
Our next question comes from online, from Sang-hoon Lee of Donghae Ilbo. Mr. Noda, when you took over as Prime Minister, relations between Korea and Japan were not good. A lot has happened since between the nations, but relations have improved significantly since last year. Since you are aiming for Prime Minister, what is your thoughts on Korea-Japan relations ahead?
次もまたオンラインの質問で、韓国のドンガイルボ市のイ・サンフン記者からの質問です。以前ですね、総理大臣務められた時は日韓関係は、あまり良くない時代だったと思います。でそれ以降も日韓関係ではさまざまなことはもちろんたくさん起きたんですけれども、特にこの1年間でその関係が改善してきている、良くなってきているというような状況があると思います。今もう一度その総理大臣というポスト を、目指している野田先生には、今の日韓関係についての考えをぜひ教えてください。
私の時はですね、日韓関係とても大事だと思ったんで、総理大臣に就任して最初の二国間関係の訪問はソウルだったんです。でそれはやっぱり法の支配であるとか民主主義であるとかというところの価値観を共有をしていて、大事な隣国でありますのでね、そこをしっかりと固めていくことが日本の外交のスタートだと思ったんです。で当時のイ・ミョンバク大統領とお会いをして、非常に1回目の会談うまくいきました。まずはそこまで。
First of all, at my time when I was Prime Minister, I believe that the Japan and Korea relations are extremely important. Therefore, my first international visit after becoming Prime Minister was to Seoul. This is, of course, sharing the same common values such as the rule of law and democracy. I see Korea as a very important neighbor. So solidifying, enhancing that relationship is very much one of the starting points for diplomacy for Japan. At that time, when I visited Seoul, then the president of Korea was Lee Myung-bak. At that time, our first meeting together went very well.
で非常に良かったと思ったのはですね、イ・ミョンバク大統領は韓米 FTA をやって国内では厳しい批判を浴びていたけれども、それは自分は間違っていないと自信を持っているとおっしゃっていた、そのなんか揺らぎのない信念というのに感銘をしましたし、私も TPP 交渉に向けて向けて協議しようと考えていた時なので、とても参考になったということと、これまでの日韓関係を振り返って、韓国の政権の支持率が下がると歴史カードを出して、そして支持率を上げようとしてきた繰り返しだったけど、私はそういうことはやらないと明確にお話をされた点で、素晴らしい大統領だなと思ったんです。
And what I was very much impressed with at that time, this was a time when there was the negotiations, or he was pushing forward with the Korea-US free trade agreement. Despite the fact that this was very much criticized domestically within Korea, he was not shaken at all in his belief and said that he was very confident in continuing to go forward in regards to this, despite this opposition. At the time, I was also looking towards the negotiations around the TPP as well. So his stance was very much a reference point for me in regards to that. There is also, if we reflect upon the longer relations between Korea and Japan, there is often a situation when domestic support levels for the government in Korea become low, they then bring out the history card as a way to increase their popularity there as well. However, President Lee said to me at that time very clearly that he would not do such a thing, which I thought he was a very impressive president therefore.
その2ヶ月後に日本に来ていただいて、シャトル外交でお会いしたときには、会談の9割がいわゆる慰安婦問題になったんで、2ヶ月前に言ったことと全然違うじゃないかというところから、残念ながら関係が冷え込みました。
However, 2 months later, when President Lee came to Japan as part of the shuttle diplomacy, the meeting that we had at that time, 90% of the meeting was actually focused on the so-called comfort women issue, therefore. So this was something which is completely different to what he had said 2 months previously to that. And it was from there that we saw a dramatic cooling of the relations.
その中で今、日韓関係というのは私は非常にいいと思っています。岸田前総理も頑張ったと思いますけど、それ以上に韓国のまさに首脳のある意味覚悟を決めた対応が日韓関係の改善につながったということは評価をしていますし、今北がウクライナに派兵をしたり、あるいはミサイル開発や核の開発もどんどん進めているときに、日韓の関係が安定的に良好であるということは素晴らしいことだと思っていますし、その関係性はこれからも続けなければいけないと思っています。
I believe I do also evaluate that the relations now between Japan and Korea are very good. I believe this has to do with the fact that former Prime Minister Kishida did make efforts in regards to this, but more than this, I think it is also, I very much highly praise or evaluate these steps of the Korean leaders in regards to really deciding to focus and to make these improvements there as well. When we have the situation today with North Korea sending troops to Ukraine, also the missile and nuclear developments as well, it is even more important important that there is a stable and positive relationship between Korea and Japan. So seeing the significance or the importance of this relationship, I think, is something that we need to continue to focus on or strengthen as we go forward.
Karen?
こんにちは。今日はありがとうございます。ラジオフランスの特派員で西村と申します。よろしくお願いします。日本での選挙の投票率は非常に低いです。つまり多くの日本人にとっては投票してもしなくてもいいんです。あまり政治のことに期待がなさそうです。立憲民主党は、特に若者女性とかの投票率を上げるために何か身近な政策を提案することができるのか、そういう期待に応えることができるのでしょうか。
My name is Nishimura of Radio France. In regards to Japanese elections, there is a very low rate of voting, rate of people participating in these elections. Many people feel that whether they vote or not is maybe irrelevant. Also, they do not necessarily have high expectations, high hopes towards elections or what impact they can have. I would like to ask, in regards to the CDP, if there are any particular policies related to people's daily life, for example, which you are looking at as a way to encourage particularly young people or women to vote, to take part in elections as well, and what your response to this very low voting rate is.
2点申し上げたいんですね。で一つ、今回思ったより投票率が高くなかったということは、9日に解散して27日投開票というわずか18日間です。で私が総理の時、解散した時、総務省に聞いたら、周知徹底するには1ヶ月必要だと言われてました。18日間じゃ短すぎて、しかも期日前投票するには投票権がいると思ってる人がいっぱいいたんですよ。最終週にね届いたっていうところも多いし、多分在外投票なんかほとんどできてないんじゃないでしょうか。という意味では今回のやり方は民主主義の精神に戻ると、もっと多くの人に投票参加してもらおうという時間が足りなかったということは問題だと思っています。その上で本質的なテーマで我々が若者政策が持っているかどうかって、コンテンツはいっぱいあるんですよ。民主党の頃からネキストジェネレーション、ネキストエレクションよりもネキストジェネレーションということを言ってた財政の問題も含めて、将来の世代から搾取するんじゃなくて将来世代に投資をするという、例えば教育の無償化とか一貫してコンテンツでは言ってきているつもりなんですけれども、メッセージの発信の仕方が例えば国民民主党のように上手ではなかったという反省点はあると思いますので、メッセージの発信の仕方はもっともっと工夫をしていきたいと思います。
I have 2 points I would like to share in response to that. First of all, looking at the fact that the number or the voting rate was perhaps lower than we had hoped or expected in this recent election, I think that a significant factor there is that the dissolution was only called on the 9th and then the election was held on the 27th, meaning only 18 days between this. At the time when I was Prime Minister, when I was speaking to the Minister in regards to the amount of time required to sufficiently inform people and prepare for an election, I indicated that 1 month was what would be necessary to have that thorough process. However, in this case, there was only 18 days, which has to be said to be too short. This means, for example, for people wanting to vote prior to the day, for example, the process required to do even the paperwork to have that sent out and so on was insufficient. It arrived maybe in just the last days, the last week of this. And also, for example, for many overseas voters, people voting from outside of Japan, many of them probably were not able to because of this very short period. So I think that this method of doing this in such a short span of time, from the perspective of the spirit of democracy in regards to having the most people able to participate in the voting as well, it was very problematic in regards to this. As to the fundamental question about whether or what kind of youth policies the CDP has in regards to contents, we have plenty in regards to this, even policies which we have been consistently holding since the DPJ days as well. For example, not looking towards the next election, but rather to the next generation, including economic or financial policies in regards to this as well. This includes, for example, making education available freely, looking at, rather than exploitation of younger generations, investment in them as well. So I think the contents of the policy are very much there. However, our issue, or what we need to work to improve more, is that we are perhaps not so skilled at conveying that message to young people. For example, in comparison to the GPPJ, how to actually get this message out there, how to communicate this message of these contents of the policy is where we need more work.
Sir, we thank you very much for your time today. Considering on morning of September 23rd, you were running for party presidency, and now 49 days later, you may be head of state again. Today, you are the fourth former Prime Minister of Japan to speak at our organization. If you come back, should you win on Monday, you will be the first in 50 years. Thank you very much for your time.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much.
And we have all our guests get an honorary one-year membership.
どうもありがとうござい
We
ます。
hope you use it soon.
ありがとうございます。失礼します。